Hey physics friends, I'm coming to you live from the Teacher's Lounge. Lovely. To give you a little bit of a tutorial on how to use your Google, Google spreadsheet to analyze some data. So what I've got here is I've got some data from a previous year's zip line that I'm going to show you kind of how to crunch and handle so make it kind of look nice. So first of all, what I want to do, I want to make my columns kind of the right size. So you'll notice here this average velocity doesn't fit. So if you mouse in between, you'll get this double arrow that pops up. And if you double click, it will auto format to the right width. So I'm just going to make these columns the correct width. Second, to find the average time, it's really easy to find the average. You just add them up and divide by 3. So we had 3 trials here. So the easiest thing the average for 0 is just 0. But the average for something like this is a little bit more difficult. Within spreadsheets, it's really easy to find averages. So you type in equals, and then you type the word average, A-V-E-R-A-G-E. Type in average, and then do a left parenthesis, and then it's going to say which values. So I'm just going to highlight the ones that I want. Make sure that you don't highlight over here with distance, that you're only highlighting the times, and then you close the parenthesis with the right, hit enter, and it's going to give you the average time. Now you could do the same thing for every one of these. You could type in equals average, highlight your cells, close your parenthesis, hit enter, and it would work. But the easiest way to do it is to just click this little, if you click in the cell and then you grab this button down here and you drag down, it will do that for every single one. Now you'll notice that a lot of your decimal places, they give you this only gives you 1, this only gives you 2. With significant figures, because of our measurements, we can only have I would think that we can only have 3. So what you're going to do is up here, these 2 guys. Whoop, wrong way. So I'll give these all 3 significant figures, and now they look nice. Now, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to find the velocity. And to find the velocity of something, it's the distance divided by the time. So what you're going to do is you're going to say equals, and then the distance is way over here, distance divide by, so it's the right next to the period on your keyboard, and then the time. You're going to use the average time, E3. So then you hit enter, and it's going to give you the velocity at that point. Now, watch what happens when I do it right here. If I say equals distance divide by time, you're going to notice that I get a divide by 0 error. That's bad. You can never divide by 0, but we're going to ask ourselves in a little bit, does the at distance 0, was the velocity 0? So at the very beginning, was the initial velocity 0? We'll see. We'll see if it fits our trend. So I'm going to do the same thing down here. Equals distance divide by time. Or you could just grab the little square and drag it all down, and it does the same formula for each one. Let's give ourselves the same number of significant figures here. Oops, wrong way. So if you look at this trend, you see how the numbers are climbing? It makes sense both from a standpoint of when I let go of it, its initial velocity was 0, and from a trend standpoint. So yes, 0 makes sense here. Let's find the acceleration next. Now your acceleration is your change in velocity divided by your change in time. So you're going to do equals velocity divide by time. Enter. And then we're going to find our accelerations for all of them. Now, be very careful. Just because your velocity is 0 doesn't mean your acceleration is 0. Look at the trend here. You'll see that 0 doesn't make sense here. Actually, a number bigger than 1, because it looks like these numbers are declining. They're getting smaller and smaller and smaller. Let's give them the right number of 0. Let's see if I can click the right one first. In fact, 0 doesn't make sense here. I'm going to leave it blank because I don't know what the acceleration is right up front. The next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to make this a little bit smaller just so I can see all of my data. So I'm going to make my font a little bit more manageable. And then when I do that, I can decrease my column widths by double clicking. You'll notice here, it looks like I'm missing a few zeros. So I'm just going to highlight all of my data and make sure that those have the correct number of zeros as well. There. So now all my data looks pretty. Life is good. All right, so now I'm going to make some charts. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go Insert, Chart. Now, I think what I want to do, I'm going to undo that. I'm going to click over here. I'm going to click outside my data, and I'll try that again. Insert, Chart. If that ever pops up, you just delete all this stuff. So this is too bad. I'm going to have to remove all these because I don't know what it thinks. So if you pop up with lots of data, just remove them all. Okay, so what we're going to do, we're going to insert our range. So I'm going to get this kind of out of the way. So I click this, what data? I'm going to grab my times. My time is always going to be my x-axis on here, so I hit enter. And then for my series, the first thing I'm going to do is make a position versus time graph. So I'm going to come over here to my series. Well, I'm going to change it into a scatter plot first of all. So I scroll down to that drop down, click scatter plot, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a series, select what range. So I'm going to add these ones. And these blue, let's see here, what did I do? That's too straight. Something's funny. Let's try that again. Let's delete these. So I want my x value to be the time always. Time. And then I wonder if I hold down Control and I select my distance also. I wonder if that works. No, it's doing them both again. Okay, I've got it figured out now. Let's try it again. So I'm going to go insert my data range, and I'm going to select time as my data range. But you'll notice here it says x. That's what I wanted to be my x-axis. So I'm going to click this again, and I'm going to highlight the time and put that in as the x-axis. And then down here for the series, that's the y-axis. I'm going to hit edit, and I want my y-axis to be position. So there, that looks better. So this right here, this graph represents my position versus time graph. So I'm gonna delete these words and I'm gonna write that. Position versus time graph for trolley. Down the zip line. Okay, so I have to rename my axes too. So I'm going to go horizontal. I'm going to double click on the horizontal because it says distance. It should say time. So I'm just going to highlight this and write time in seconds. Excuse me. And then I'm going to highlight my vertical axis. And I'm going to say position in meters per second. And there. I've got a position versus time graph for... I can also get rid of this dot. This is the legend right here. So if you go over to legend and you turn it off, none, it'll get rid of that one dot. And then we're good to go. So here's a position versus time graph. And when you look at it, you can kind of see that it looks very linear right here. But then down towards the beginning, it looks kind of quadratic, like increasing, and then you get a constant speed. So let's see what the rest of our data looks like. So there's my position versus time graph. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make a velocity versus time graph. So I'm just going to keep repeating the same process using the different data. So I'll go insert again, insert chart. We're going to do a scatter plot. And so our x values are going to be time. This is tricky to do. I'm gonna click here, and you'll notice what I'm doing is I'm looking over here at these numbers, and I can highlight. So I get down. I'm making sure that I'm on row number 18. And I hit OK. And now for my y value, oh shoot, that should have been my x values. So I'll do that again. I've learned my lesson. And then my y values, I'm going to hit edit. That's going to be my velocity. So I'm going to select all my velocities, hit OK. I'm going to go to customize. I'll turn that legend off. And I'll go to my chart, my titles. Chart title, velocity of a trolley down a zip line. So I'll name the horizontal axis should be time in seconds. The vertical axis should be velocity in meters per second. You have to make sure that you put units on there because nobody can infer anything from your graph if you don't have any units. So here's my velocity versus time graph. I'll bring this down here. Let's look at this. It looks like my velocity, it looks like it's approaching some asymptote. See how it's like leveling off? It like looks like it's getting pretty good, but then all of a sudden it starts to level off here. It's one of the questions. Why is it doing that? When you see your data, maybe your data will look like this previous data. Why is it doing that? What do you think? And then lastly, we'll make an acceleration versus time graph. So we'll do insert, chart, make sure that it's a scatter plot. Our x values. Now this case, remember, we don't have an acceleration at 0, so we're going to select, starting at 1 for our time. And then we'll hit OK. And then for our y-axis, why did that do that again? My x-axis should be these numbers, and I don't know why it's not. Hopefully yours is acting a little bit better than mine. And then for your y, it's going to be the acceleration. Make sure I have all of them. Why is that doing that? Why is edit? Remove that series. Boy, just when you need it to work, things are not working. Okay, I'm back. I got her. So I'll rename this thing acceleration of a trolley down a zip line. Now I'll rename my horizontal to time in seconds and my vertical to acceleration in meters per second squared. The caret key, which is Shift 6, and then I'll get rid of that legend. So here's my acceleration data, and you can see when you look at this data that my acceleration looks like it's getting smaller. And why is that? Why does your accelerate? It looks like this is a logarithmic function where it starts out really high and it starts tailing off. Why is the acceleration decreasing? So this is kind of an introduction on how to use Google Sheets, which I don't like. I like Microsoft Excel a lot better. But how do you use the things that you have available to crunch lots of data to start to make some deductions about what's happening?